Hello everybody, welcome to Red Toolhouse. On our YouTube channel, we talk about all things homesteading and try to implement some of those things on our rural 100 acres here in southern West Virginia. Well, in today's video, I want to talk about how to protect your pastured pork operation from falling pork prices. Well, in a recent video, one of the videos where we talked about how many pigs should you have per acre on your pastured pork operation, we got a lot of good feedback. In fact, 95% of that feedback was positive. We did get one comment, however, that actually went into a very long discussion. Maybe discussion's too polite a way to put that. But there was some back and forth between this viewer and me on this discussion of pastured pork. And that discussion got pretty heated, I would say. I won't get into the details. Obviously, if you want to look at it, you can go to the video here and see it. But it was interesting. The guy started out okay, but then really started lashing out at me to the point where he's calling me a liar because of my pastured pork operation, that pigs cannot be pastured, that they can't grow, they can't do this, that the whole pastured pork operation is voodoo and is basically a bunch of liars. Even said that Joel Salatin is a snake oil salesman. So I don't think Joel's necessarily the end-all be-all, but he's definitely not a snake oil salesman. So it was interesting. So the pigs you see behind me are actually all stunt doubles. They're not really eating any of this pasture right now. They're not really the size that they are. It's all video editing we've done to make them look bigger. Whereas my son says it's all animatronics. We have robot pigs out here in the pasture, just so we can trick people into buying our pork. It got me wondering, why is this guy so fired up about this? I mean, he wrote a diatribe multiple times on the comments, just these huge industry studies, and the confined pig operations are actually more humane, produces better quality, less crushing, all these type of things. Had this huge explanation of why he feels that way is the only way. And even to the point, like I said, it got a little heated where he asked me, he said, "How do you sleep at night?" I said, well, Brian, I usually sleep on my left side with my hand placed on my wife's perfectly shaped posterior. But I'm not quite sure what that has to do with our discussion about pastured pigs. Well, our conversation ended like all conversations do. We just stopped responding to one another. But it got me thinking, it's like, wow, where does this attitude come from? The whole live and let live thing, not necessarily in this guy's vocabulary. But it was interesting, just the very next day I came across this Bloomberg article, and I'm going to share it here. This Bloomberg article is titled, "Why is it a great time to be a fancy pig farmer?" And so I saw that title, I was like, yeah, what's that all about? So I jumped into it, and it was quite interesting. It's a really good read. I'll post a link to it below in the video description so you can check it out as well. But the article is basically centered around the fact that recently with the U.S. government getting involved in some of these trade disputes, increasing tariffs, putting tariffs on certain items, well, that happened to come across the pork industry as well. So it appears that when you look at commodity pork, that 40% of our pork sales are exported into Mexico and China. So China and Mexico have both put retaliatory tariffs on our products. So that has reduced or slowed the export of pork, U.S. pork, to China and Mexico. So of course we end up having a glut. We have an overstock of pork, if you will. Well, of course, with anyone that's taken basic business classes in high school, what happens when you have a surplus of something? Well, the price has to drop. So evidently the price of pork has dropped dramatically. And it's kind of funny. You may say, well, Troy, don't you know these things as a pig farmer? Don't you know what the price of pork's doing? No, I don't follow it. I don't look at it. It has nothing to do with my customer base and my operation. Easy there, Slick. I don't care if pork is $8 a pound or if it's $2 a pound. It doesn't affect what I have going on with my operation. The article goes on to source an email statement from the National Pork Producers Council that says, "We now face large financial losses and contraction because of escalating trade disputes." So I read that article, I was like, wow, okay, so there's a big issue here. If pork prices are dropping as quickly as they are and they're falling as far as they are, what is this doing to the commodity pork farmer? It's obviously putting them in a bind, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I understand where this guy's vitriol was coming from, that he's, if he's a big CAFO or a big commodity-based pork farmer and it's taking it on the chin right now, then I could see where maybe you'd be a little upset. And yeah, man, if I was in his situation and the cost of my pig operation was huge and had all this overhead, all these huge expenses in the buildings and all the things he had. He talked about having shower systems so staff would come in and shower and do all that so they didn't bring disease into the pig operation. If I had all that expense, all that money and investment tied up in that, and I saw the sales of my product doing this, yeah, I'd be pretty upset too. I'd be quaking in my boots. So that may be the source of his concern, and obviously lashing out at me may have been just an outlet. No big deal. It is what it is. It's YouTube, right? Everybody loves everybody. So of course, if you go in to read the article was titled, "Why It's a Great Time to Be a Fancy Pig Farmer." The article goes on to discuss an interview with White Oak Pastures in Georgia. White Oak Pastures is a pork operation that raises heritage breed pigs. They raise them on pasture. They feed them organic peanuts and pasture-raised eggs, and of course whatever forage they get naturally. And the proprietor of White Oak Pastures goes on to say that, yeah, you can find Oscar Mayer bacon in the store for $7.99 a pound, and that price is dropping, but my Iberico bacon is still going for $31.99 a pound. That's some bacon. That's getting 32 bucks a pound for bacon. Yeah, you got some serious stuff going on there. So, hats off to that guy. That's awesome. So, White Oak Pastures is just one example. The article goes on to talk about some other examples of pastured pork operations, and that's kind of the similarities in these examples that they're showing, that it's a pastured operation, and saying how these people aren't seeing this dip, or they're not affected by this dip in pork prices. And so it got me thinking, what can we do as, whether our operation is 20 pigs like we are, or you're a couple thousand pigs like White Oak Pastures are in some of these larger operations. What can we do as pastured pig operations to make sure that we've insulated ourselves from this volatile market? So in thinking about this week, I've identified 5 keys to insulate your pastured pork operation from volatile pork markets. Well, key number 1 is simple. It is quality over quantity. When you look at these large commercial hog operations, these enclosure, these confinement operations, they are dealing with thousands and thousands of pigs per square, well, not per square foot, but obviously in a much tighter scenario here. The concentration of pigs per square foot is much greater than what ours is. Obviously, large investments in equipment and building infrastructure, and even investments in the animals themselves. When you're dealing with thousands and thousands of hogs, each one of those hogs costs money. So that's a quantity based. It's all about getting as much bang for your buck. The economy of scale is a term you hear all the time in business. Is you can make more money because even though your profit margin's tight, you've got quantity to cover you up there. But what we're talking about with pastured operation is quality. Now again, people may argue, well, my CAFO raised pork is just as good as yours. Whatever, that's a debate that can go on till the end of time. But we look at quality and say, well, we're letting a pig be a pig here. You can see here they're nice, digging nice holes in the pasture. We've had just a little bit of rain here, so the ground's just soft enough that they're having a field day here. So these pigs are able to enjoy this pasture. They're getting a very eclectic diet. They still get their feed, but they have all kinds of access to roots. One here was just eating, what was he eating? Looked like he was eating a little bit of plantain there, so he was getting all over it. So it is what it is. To us, we feel that this is a better quality. Our customers feel that this is better quality because a pig gets to be a pig. It gets to spend time on pasture. It gets a wide variety of diet, and it produces a better quality pork. I think so, and my customers think so. Well, the second key to insulate your pastured pork operation from volatile markets is to make it unique. Look at your competition around you. Are you in an area where there's a ton of people doing pastured pork? Well, if that's the case, then you've got to adjust. You've got to figure out, Do you say, well, I finish these pigs on acorns, or I finish these pigs on peanuts, or I finish these pigs on walnuts, whatever the case may be, and you have to figure out how to do that. Maybe you don't have access to those things, and you'd have to buy them and bring them in. Or maybe you go with a special breed. Maybe you're just doing cuny-cune. Maybe you're just doing certain heritage breeds. Maybe whatever the case may be, look at your competition and diversify. In my situation, there's not a lot of people around here doing pastured pork. I've got a friend that does it just about 10 miles away. We both have smaller operations. We're not stepping on each other's toes because there's tons of customer base out there that we can take advantage of and we can utilize because people want what we've got, and we've got a great opportunity there. So as far as uniqueness goes, our uniqueness is simply, hey, our pigs are standing out here in the field. They do have access to a lot of white oak and hickory, so they do get to finish in the fall on that type of mast, so it adds to the flavor as they finish on that protein. So we do have some uniqueness there, but look at your operation, look at your surroundings, say, what can I do to make this a little different? If it means you have to adjust and change your breed or change your feeding habits or how you even do things, I don't know if you picked that up on camera, this one's doing twirlies here, but that's something to take a look at. Well, the third, and really should be maybe the first, these keys are not necessarily ranked in order of which is more important, but the third is clearly identify your audience. Not everybody is going to want your pastured pork, and not everyone is going to see the value in it. Again, if you look at these commodities, the pork market, they're trying, because they're dealing in volume, they're trying to sell in volume. We want everybody that ever thinks about buying a piece of pork to buy our pork. Well, that's not what we're doing here. If somebody goes to Walmart and likes to beat up the butcher because the 99-cent per pound pork doesn't look quite right, or it's a little too fat, or a little too little fat, whatever the case may be, I don't want that person as a customer, because when I say, hey, you're looking at buying 99-cent a pound pork chops, but mine go for $6.75 a pound, and you're already complaining about the 99-cent, well, I don't know that I want to try to convince you to buy my $6.75 a pound pork chop. So looking at, say, what is my ideal customer base? Well, if you're already got an operation going, you're selling your pork, look at the people that buy from you on a regular basis and say, what do they have in common? Maybe they have disposable income. Maybe they're really into healthy eating. Maybe they're CrossFitters. Maybe they're into paleo or keto or whatever the case may be, and they want that cleaner source of protein. Find those people and then find their friends. Find people just like them. And again, in marketing, we say define your universe. What is the universe of your potential audience there? So identify your customer base and only go after those. Don't try to convince the people that are buying the 99-cent a pound whatever. Don't try to convince them to be your customer, because you're just going to run your head against the wall. You're going to end up spending more time trying to answer that person's questions or concerns and dealing with their complaints than you are with 20 other customers that understand and appreciate what you've got going on here. Number 4 is huge, and it's something that I've embraced and really just have run with, and I encourage everyone to do that, is to start small and grow strategically. If you're familiar with our channel where we've talked about pastured pork, some of the videos in the past, I always say start with 3 pigs. If it's your first year, start with 3 pigs, no more, no less, because that's going to allow you to see how 3 pigs function in your setup. It's going to allow you to butcher one for yourself so you can eat, so you can enjoy the fruits of your labor at the end of the year. It's going to allow you to keep one for breeding if you want. And it's going to allow you to sell one to a friend or family member that you can say, hey, buy my pig, and you can recoup. Usually you can recoup the cost of your feed for the entire year, so it becomes revenue neutral, or maybe even put a little money in your pocket that first year. But in that first year, you're going to learn so much. You're going to say, oh, wow, man, I'm going to change this. I'm going to change my pasture layout. I'm going to change the breed of hog. I'm going to change my feed source. I'm going to change the time that I finish. I'm going to change my processor. So all these things you're going to realize that you need to tweak. And if you have a very small operation, you can be very agile and very flexible. That's the benefit of small business: agility, flexibility. So if you start small and you grow strategically. Don't grow for the sake of growth. Most pastured pork farmers are not in it to make $1 million and to build some huge corporate conglomeration of pastured pig operators. Most pastured pork operators just simply want to raise a good product and supplement their income, or provide a nice income for them to live off of. So when it comes time to grow, look at, say, what makes sense to grow. Is it simply adding more pigs? Is it expanding pasture? Is it partnering with other people, neighbors that have land, and maybe you work out some deal there? So really look at your growth through a lens of strategy. What makes sense to grow, how to grow, and where to grow, and obviously make sure your customer base can come along with you. If you've sold, let's say you're in X amount of years in and you usually sell 40 pigs a year, and you're like, okay, next year, because I've done so well, I'm going to 120 pigs a year because I always sell out my 40. Well, you better make sure that you've got the market in place to sell those 120, because you may get the 40 sold next year and realize, wow, I've got 80 pigs I got to move and I'm starting to run out of options. I haven't been able to get enough marketing out there, haven't been able to reach enough people to move these hogs. So grow strategically and grow wisely. Well, the fifth key is just as important, and that comes to your customers. Educate your customers. Some of your customers are going to know right off the top of their head, oh, you've got a pastured pig operation? Love it. I want in on it. Bang. I've had people like that. And as soon as they found out I was raising pigs and how I was raising them, it's a no-brainer. They always order from me. They love it. I've never had them balk at prices. I've never had them have any issues there. They just buy it because they like how we raise it. But there's always some that are being introduced to it, or it's a friend to say, hey, Troy, so-and-so buys from you. She's a good friend of mine. I'm thinking of buying from you. Can you explain this to me? Well, take those opportunities, even though you may be in a hurry, maybe you've got a lot to do, and you're like, man, I don't have time to talk about the 101s of pastured pig operation. Take the time to do that. If you can educate your customers, answer their questions, explain to them what you do, how you do it, why you do it, and include any resources you have. And it's kind of funny, if you go back and look at some of our first efforts with our YouTube channel and our first efforts with our website, the only reason I put all that together was simply for this. I wanted people to be able to find information that I got asked all the time. So again, I would take these questions, I wouldn't run anybody off, but I'd say, hey, yes, that's a great question. I get that question asked all the time. Here's the answer. Oh, by the way, if you have any more questions, go to our website, and under pastured pork, there's a video on what is pastured pork. There's also a video on how we sell pastured pork, how we break it up, what you'd expect to pay, when we process, all those things. So I have those resources available to educate the customer so they're not surprised. The last thing you want to do is have a customer buy, let's say, a whole hog from you, and you process at the end of the year, and you say, okay, here's your whole hog. It's, in our situation, our whole hogs usually go $700 to $1,000 a whole hog, maybe a little bit more depending on the weight. Say, okay, here it is. You owe me $1,000 plus processing costs, and it's a huge pile of pork that they say that won't even fit in my freezer. That obviously would be a bad, bad situation. If their jaw hits the ground because of the price, and their jaw hits the ground because it's so much pork they don't know where to put it, then you haven't done your job, and you're going to lose that customer most likely. So educate them in advance to say, yeah, here's what we've got. We've got, when we do whole hogs, you're looking at this much pork. It's usually cost about this much based on our history. Processing fees can be this much. When we process it, or after we pick it up from the processor, it's going to come in this many boxes and roughly be this size. Are you sure you've got a freezer big enough? Maybe check with a neighbor or a friend. Maybe you can half that so you can spread out the pork in your freezer. Explain all of that. Make sure they know exactly what to expect. And nobody gets surprised. And it keeps you from losing your mind at the end of the year when you're trying to deal with 20 customers and all of them are saying, well, wait a minute, I didn't expect it to be like this. You've done your homework in advance. You've educated them in advance, and they know. But also, an educated customer is going to be one of your best customers when it comes to finding others. In marketing, we like to refer to them as disciples. Every business has a group of disciples. People that say, man, I really love your product, I really love your business. I will go out and tell everybody about it. And I don't expect anything in return. It's just because I like what you do so much, I'm just going to shout it from the rooftops. Businesses have those people. It's usually a nice, small, knit group. But when you have those people, they're worth their weight in gold when it comes to marketing. They're going to go out and tell their friends, tell other people about what you do and how you do it, and maybe they come be a customer. Well, an educated customer has a better chance of being a disciple. If they feel that, hey, I bought a bunch of pastured pork from Red TOOLHOUSE Farm, and a coworker says, Well, why is that? Why in the world did you pay $6.75 a pork chop when you go to Walmart and get it for 99 cents? Well, it's funny you should ask. Let me tell you. Here's why. Here's all the reasons why I do that. That person's educated, so that person's actually your salesperson at that time. And they're selling your product and you're not doing a thing. So they're convincing their friends, their coworkers, yeah, this is great stuff. Here's why it costs more, but here's why it's worth it. So an educated customer can become your best salesperson, can become your disciple for your operation. Well, if you're still not sure why are pastured pork operators insulated from this volatile market, if my 5 keys really didn't resonate with you, maybe this will be a good example. What about craft beer? Why is craft beer so much more expensive than the typical domestic stuff you find? So like right now, if you go into any supermarket, we have a Kroger chain around here, and there's a Kroger chain that's in the high rent district of our town. We call it the Gucci Kroger. So if you go in Gucci Kroger, they have these huge coolers full of beer. It's the wall of beer, if you will. It's easily 50 feet long coolers of beer. And over here in this corner, they've got the Budweiser and the Michelobes and the Natty Lights. All those you guys that made it through college on Natty Light, you know what that's all about. They have all this stuff in one side, and it's the domestics. Well, instead of it taking up 60 to 70% of the cooler space, now it's just a little spot. And then from here all the way down, it's every beer you can imagine, names you've never heard of. Local breweries, microbreweries, imported breweries, all these type of things. And they are usually anywhere from 50% to 100% more expensive per volume than the Anheuser-Busch products or any of the other big breweries. So why is that? You say, well, it's a better product, Troy. It tastes better, it's made cleaner, it's crafted this way, it's blah, 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 blah. It's put in pretty bottles, it's got a pretty wrapper on it. There's all kinds of things you could say as to why that is the case, that they can get twice as much revenue out of the same volume of beer. But the fact of the matter is, customers are responding to that. The trends are showing that people want to pay more money for this beer. Maybe they don't want to pay more money for this beer, but they want this beer and they can justify paying more money. So it's really interesting if you look and see more of these stores are carrying less and less volume of the domestics, the basics, and they're carrying more and more of these craft beers. And because that's simple to supply and demand. It's also interesting when you look, if you get really bored, look up Budweiser and see how many craft breweries they've purchased over the past 10 years. Anheuser-Busch has made it an effort, because they're losing so much market share, that they're going out and they're buying all these small craft breweries. Can you imagine being a craft brewery, a small-time operation, and a representative from Anheuser-Busch shows up and says, hey, we'll give you guys $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million or $10 million, $20 million, whatever, for your brewery because we need your label. Yeah, again, whether you decide to sell or not, that's a great situation to be in. So think of pastured pork operation, that same situation, that you're following what people want, you're producing something that's different, better, more in demand right now, and can justify that higher expense. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, Troy, isn't craft beer a trend? So is pastured pork a trend? Yes, and maybe yes. Maybe both are. Maybe craft beer is a trend and it's going to go away at some point. Maybe pastured pork is a trend and is going to go away at some point. That really doesn't concern me. I think there's always going to be some market for pastured pork. But even if it does go away, what have I lost? Well, right now I can obviously scuttle my herd here, turn them all into pork chops. And all I have to do is take down a single strand of electric fence and let this pasture grow back to whatever. I don't have a huge building. I don't have tons of staff. I don't have all this equipment and infrastructure that I've invested in that I have to figure out, how do I get my money back on that? I just simply let stuff grow back up. So pastured pork allows you to be insulated. Even if the market totally drops on this type of pork or this type of process, then you're really not out a lot. The topic of this video has really got me thinking about this, and I'm going to carry a discussion over to Friday's video where we're going to talk about how to get the best prices for your homestead products. And we're not just going to talk about pork, we're going to talk about any homestead product that you produce or make or resell, whatever. Talk about some marketing strategies and how to get those best prices. So look for that in 2 days. That'll be Friday's video. Well, if you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you want to comment below, feel free to do so, even if you don't agree with me, even if you think I'm full of it. feel free to comment below. If we can keep it civil, we'll have some good back and forth. If you go across the line, I just won't talk to you anymore. Well, take care, everybody.